Microsoft Word 2003, indexing, cross-referencing, and footnotes. We all know that at some point in time we are going to have to give a reference to something in our documents, whether it's through an endnote, a footnote, or perhaps maybe add something to an index. Well, how do we do that? Well, we first off have to go in and mark that text. So mark it right here. We're going to move on and show you what we're going to accomplish. So here we're going to do a lot of referencing, marking, building, cross-referencing, footnotes and endnotes. What does that mean? Well, marking and referencing, we're going to take the text that we want to index or reference. We're going to then build the index from that material. We can even do cross-referencing, which allows us to move from one place to another. And then finally, we need to give the proper attribution to attribute information that we might have taken from a magazine or a newspaper article in our documents. Well, we can use the footnotes and endnotes so people know, hey, where did you hear that or where did you get that information? Probably the first thing we need to talk about is why do we use indexes and what makes them different than like a table of contents or maybe our table of figures? Well, the figures are pretty simple. They're pictures or they're figures or they're captions that we use. Table of contents, though, is very close to what your index is. Indexes, typically, they show up at the end of a document, maybe a book or maybe a long report, and they alphabetically list all your main topics, your names, your terms, anything used in the document, and they give it a page number so you can reference it. That's, what an index does. So what they call these things are index entries. And as you can see here, we're going to use our History of Instruments outline document, and we're going to go through here and we're going to start indexing some of the main points of our document. Now, of course, the table of content will go ahead and automatically do it based on heading and information and things like that. But what you're going to do is you're going to select the text that you want to index, whether in this case maybe we want to use lorem ipsum, which is, again, that Latin that we use to generate, to kind of pretend we have a lot of text. Quite frankly, I'm lazy, as I've said in the past videos. I don't want to have to type it all out. So here we can say, anytime it says lorem ipsum, I want a page reference to that, because that's an important topic for anything like that. Now what I can do is come up here to insert, and I need to make this a reference. So obviously a reference. Now it's not a footnote, it's not a caption or a cross-reference, it's an index. So you can go to Index and Tables, and down here you can see where it says you can mark the entry. Now once we mark some entries, we'll come back here to the Index and Tables and talk about how we set this up. It's obviously very familiar if you saw the video on the table of contents, the table of figures, and the table of authorities. But here we're going to go ahead and click Mark Entry. Now, by the way, if I don't want to go through all that of insert and reference and get to the index and tables, let me go ahead and cancel. All I need to do is hit Shift-Alt-X, and it opens up my Mark Index Entry. Pretty cool. Nice little shortcut there for you. Now, of course, I've selected the text, so it automatically pops in and says your main entry is lorem ipsum. Now, you can also have a sub-entry if you want. So your main entry could be lorem, and then you could say your sub-entry is something else, so that way it's like associating it with your main entry. You can also do a cross-reference, which we'll talk about a little bit later, current page, or a page range. Well, what does that mean? Well, maybe the topic that you're talking about, lorem ipsum, or in this case maybe Persians and Greeks, maybe it covers several pages. You can do a page range, so instead of just putting individual pages, it will say, all right, from page 20 to page 26, so 6 pages worth, this topic is covered. Now that's good because you don't want to put 6 different pages on the index. Maybe it makes it look cluttered. So what we'll go ahead and do is you can go ahead and say page number format. We'll go ahead and bold it, so that way it'll bold all the pages that are referenced by lorem ipsum. Now I can do something here. I can mark this reference, but as you know, in previous videos, this lorem ipsum regenerates itself quite a bit through here. Maybe I want all references. Well, if I click Mark All, watch what happens. Now the first thing, you'll see it automatically goes and it shows your paragraph formatting, shows the paragraphs, shows all the little spaces, and all your markings, all your tags and everything. And one of the tags is right here, XE lorem ipsum /bold. That means that you want the page number to be bold. Here is your reference, lorem ipsum, and this is going to be put on the end of your page. Now this is a tag. This is hidden text. This wouldn't actually show, so if I take it off, See, it disappears. It's not really there, and it wouldn't print that way. But if I show hide, I can see my references. Now remember what I said. I said I wanted to mark all of those references. And Word is smart enough, and so if I scroll down here, eventually I am going to see another lorem ipsum with a tag on it. Yep, there it is. Let me move my mark index entry a little bit. And you can see here, lorem ipsum with my reference. Right here, same thing with the page number. So I come down here and scroll down more, and you're going to find even more of these references. Here's another reference. So I marked all of them in the dialog, in the document. Also see that this says the dialog box will stay open so you can mark multiple index entries. Let's go ahead and do that. So let me scroll up here, and let's say I want to mark the Persians. So I want to mark the Persians, right? So now I can come up here, click in the mark index entry, and it says, oh, Persians. You want to do the Persians. Okay, we can do that. Let's do the current page. So I go ahead and click mark. It marks Persians. And then I want to mark the Japanese. So I go ahead and click on this now. Changes to Japanese. Anytime you select something and then re-click on it, it will automatically update. So I go ahead and mark it. So now I have the Japanese going to be marked, Middle Ages, and let me go ahead and do another one of these where there's many, many of them. So let me deselect this one so I don't grab too much here. Anytime it says in hack, nice phrase, I guess, and we'll do another mark all. So now anytime it says that, it's going to mark all. Okay, let's go ahead and close this. Go ahead and hide that. Now what's going to happen is, if you notice, at the top, I don't have my table of contents. You can't see anything. And if you scroll all the way down here to the bottom, I don't have anything yet. So what do I need to do? What am I doing wrong? Well, don't forget, we have to make our index table. So if we come up here, let's go ahead and scroll to the end. We're going to put it down here at the bottom. Insert, reference, index and tables, and I'm going to insert an index. Now it's going to tell you, do you want to right align the page numbers? I like that. It looks a little bit better. We're familiar with these tab leaders from our table of contents. Go ahead and put that there. You want it indented. How many columns do you want? What language? Do you want to auto mark things? Auto mark, by the way, would automatically go in and find your headings and other things. You can modify just like you did there. So we go ahead and click OK, and there it is. At the very end, we have in our two columns, in hack, which is I, J, L, P, it's alphabetized. In hack is on page 2, 3, 4, and 5. Japanese is on page 1. Lorem ipsum is on 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. It's on all of them. Persians is on page 1. So we can see that we obviously can utilize this. And if I wanted to say, well, I don't want this right here behind. So notice if I select any of this stuff, it's going to show that this is actually a table. This is our index table. So I'm going to go ahead and hit enter and hit control enter and put it on a separate page. And then I can put in index, highlight it, center it, and you guys say, oh, hey, this looks more familiar. This is what an index looks like. And so you have that index at the very end, and because I put a hard return here, a hard page break, it will automatically move it down to another page, even if I added more text here, or if I added more things. So this is a good feature for us. So we are able to now have our index here at the very end. And just like with anything else, with the table of contents, you can update it by adding more markings and more references, and then just hit update. Boom, you're set. You're ready to go. So now for our history of instruments, here, anytime it says lorem ipsum, we can do that. History of instruments, we're ready to go. Now what about cross-referencing? Because sometimes we want to reference something else instead of just taking every single reference that we have and indexing it. Maybe instead we want to cross-reference it to something else. How do we do that? Well, the first type of cross-reference I want to show you is the one that you would put into your index. In other words, if you remember, we have our lorem ipsum, and I can show you that. We've got our index markings here. So let's come down and let's say that we want that nullum congu, or congue, or however you would say that, wants to refer, anytime you see this, look for lorem ipsum. And that's what you're going to want to put in there. So I can select this text, and I can go ahead and hit my Alt-Shift-X, and it says, all right, here's your main entry into the index. And notice here where it says cross-reference. If I select cross-reference, I can type in C, lorem, I need to spell it right, lorem ipsum. Go ahead and put it in bold like I've done all the other references. So I go ahead and hit mark. Now notice it changes my index. It says, here's my reference, but this is what you're going to print with bold, and you're going to have your tabbed over. So some of these codes, for those of you who do coding in XML and HTML, you'll be like, some of this stuff looks very familiar to me. And it should, because it is just part of the coding that we have here. So we go ahead and hide. By the way, if I forgot to tell you this, I'm going to tell you this now. Anytime you do indexing or table of contents, you want to hide your coding like that, because literally Word it'll make an error because they're adding all those little context things, and it makes it hard for the pagination. So you have to be careful about that. So make sure you hide your paragraph markings. So now we can come down here, scroll down to the bottom where our index is. Now notice my index is pretty much still the same. Now what you can do is select anywhere into your table form here, then right click, see where it says update field? That's what we're going to want to do. We're going to want to update the field, and then boom, there it went. There's nullum conge C lorem ipsum. So we can now have our index, we have our cross-reference in an index. Now this is one way of doing cross-referencing. The other way that you can put a cross-reference is to jump to some information somewhere else in the document. So what we'll do is we'll mark locations in the document, name them, and then we can then cross-reference to page numbers, paragraph numbers, headings, and that's the kind of the one I'm going to show you right now. So let's say if we come up here to ancient history and Persians and Greeks, and I want to see more information, and I want it to reference down to somewhere further in my document. Well, how do I do that? Well, I'm going to type in a lead-in. So let's say I'll put it in parentheses, for more information. Actually, I won't do it up here because that formatting-wise, that doesn't look all that good. So I'm going to add an paragraph there, and here I'll put for more information, see, and I'll put a space there. And now what I'm going to do is going to come up here to insert, reference, cross-reference. Now this is something a little new. Now what do you want to see? And notice I'm going to insert it as a hyperlink. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to say I want a reference type that's going to be a heading. Now which heading am I going to want to cross-reference? Well, I'm going to want to cross-reference maybe the masters. Okay. Now it says insert the reference to the heading text, which will say the masters. You can also do the page number, heading number, with context, full context, or above and below. I'll just stick with the heading text. So that way it says the same thing. Now notice it's going to insert it as a hyperlink. We're going to talk about that in just a minute, because cross-references are a form of hyperlinks that only refer to your local document, your same document, either a master document and its subdocuments. If you want to go to a different document, in other words, a whole nother, not the history of instruments, but you want to go somewhere else, you're going to have to use a standard hyperlink, not a cross-reference. So if you're trying to do cross-references and going, why isn't this working to another document? Then you'll know why. You'll need to use a hyperlink. So in this case, we'll go ahead and say the masters. We click Insert, Close, and it says for more information, see the masters. And so now, notice it gives me that current document, Control and link to follow the, Control plus click to follow link, just like my table of contents. So I'll hit Control, click, boom, there I am down at the masters. So you can see that. Now, of course, I can come up here and format this to make it look more like a link on your page. And sometimes when you do things like this, you might say, well, you know, I want it to be a little bit, the font to be a little bit different color. I can change the font. I can even highlight it. So now it looks a little bit different. Now, okay, maybe we won't want to highlight it, but you can see that you can change it to a different font if it's going to be an electronic version of the document. Now, if you print it, what you probably will want to do is not just use the heading. you would probably want to use the page number reference as well. And so that way on a printed document, it would say, for more information, see the master's page such and such. So these are cross references, and we can use these to, again, help get around in our documents quickly, effectively, and coordinate and organize our content. And that's the most important thing that we're trying to do here. Last but not least, we do want to show you footnotes and endnotes, because we might use those as well. Now, footnotes are referencing or little text, usually to say, hey, this word might mean something different in a different language, or we had a quote. Maybe I had this whole thing as a quote. In fact, let's go ahead and put quote marks around it. I'll put quotes around this. And what I can do is I can say, where did I get this quote from? What research document did I get to, or television show did I watch it on? And I want to put a reference at the bottom of the page. Well, that would be a footnote. If I want to, I can also do endnotes. Endnotes go all the way to the end of the document, right? They're at the end. Makes sense. And this is in the footer. So in this case, what you're going to do is this is going to be where my reference mark is. I always put at the end of whatever I'm referencing. This is my quote here. So I come up here to Insert, Reference, Footnote. My footnotes come up here, and also you can do the endnotes if you want at the end of the document. Endnotes, you typically use the little small Roman numerals, while footnotes use the number format is going to be 1, 2, and 3. You can use a custom mark too if you want and use some sort of symbol, but I'm not going to worry about that. Now, as soon as I start with my footnotes, it's going to start at 1, and it will number continuously throughout. Now, if I apply any changes, it's going to apply the changes to this section, or I can do it to the whole document. Now, this is important because sometimes your sections are usually how you as an author are going to break your chapters up into sections. So for each section or chapter, you would have 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way at however many footnotes, and then for the next chapter, you would start over again. And that's why you'd want to stay with the apply changes to this section, and you would want to mark your chapters as sections. Make sense? I think so. So in this case, let's go ahead and just start with a footnote. We're going to put a footnote here. It's going to start at number 1. I'm going to go ahead and insert it. Now it comes down, and look, it comes down to the bottom of the page, and here's my first footnote. And so I can say, as spoken by Latin professor Dr. Tanan, something like that. So, obviously shouldn't probably make fun of the Latin-speaking people, so we'll go ahead and say Dr. Spock. Dr. Spock, live long and prosper. So we now have a reference, a footnote here. Now, if I select off of it, it stays right there, and I can come back up and look, there's my, my little footnote. Now check this out. Tooltips will automatically, when I roll over it on this document, it'll show up showing your footnotes. Now this is part of the tooltips options that you can set with your options there. Now let's go ahead and do another quote here. We'll do this one right here. Let me put quote marks around it. And then I'm going to insert another footnote. I go ahead and click Insert. And notice it goes automatically to number 2. And I'll say Time Magazine November 12th, 2005. Okay, so that's when it thing, and then I'd probably want to put page 32. So that way I have a reference to where I received that information. So this is what a footnote would allow me to do. Now endnotes, same thing. It's just they collect them at the very end of the document for what we can do. So all of this is just, again, another way to, number 1, reference things, mark them, index them, whatever you can think of. Word 2003 is going to enable you to do it. Of course, when you come right down to it, it's all about not only organizing your data, but also having the ability to reference where things are, marking the text you need, referencing it, so that way when it's time to build an index at the very end of your document, you'll have all that stuff. Now you can do it automatically, mark everything as we saw. We could also see sometimes you might want to cross-reference. I like to say, not only am I talking about it here, but we're referencing it over here. So, hey, come on over here and I'll show you something else about that. And then finally, you have the footnotes and endnotes, which deal mostly with, giving, attributing information that you've taken or researched from other people and making sure that they know about it, or maybe giving you a little bit more information, like this word actually means this in Greek or in Latin or whatever language that you're referring to, depending on the documentation you're doing. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.